So today we thought we'd start the year off just nice and easy, though, with something not too controversial. So here we are with 4 excellent speakers, and allow me to quickly present them before we allow them to state their case. So we have over here on the proposition side, Jake Wallis Simons. He's a columnist for the Daily Telegraph, but he's okay, really. We don't hold it against him. He's a foreign correspondent. He's got a brilliant podcast, by the way, called The Brink, presented with the former parachute regiment officer Andrew Fox. It's the antidote to Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell. Well, we can all do with a bit of that. Dr. Simons also writes for publications including The Spectator, The Jewish Chronicle, of which, of course, he was the previous editor. And he has just published a new book, wave it about, Jake, called Never Again, ? Very good book. I have actually listened to it. Jake reads it himself, and it's a lovely voice to have in the room with you, I can tell you. We also have, I'll then jump to the opposition side, just to balance things out. We have with us someone who is well known in the debating community in London, Peter Humcross. He is a former politician, served at the London Assembly from 2004 to 2008, and he was a member there of the 7th July Resilience Committee, drawing up responses, drawing up recommendations in response to the London bombings of 2005. Peter has traveled extensively across the Middle East and beyond. He's even worked and lived in Israeli kibbutzim. So there you go. Former computer engineer, now retired, and now he is a very skilled debater. So he's part of the Sylvan Debate Club here in London. And if you haven't been to that one, I do recommend that as well. It was founded in 1868. So it is one of the oldest continuingly running debate societies, certainly in Britain. And he is also a member of what is thought to be the oldest free speech society in the world, the Society of Coges. Then, jumping back to the proposition, we have another writer. What's with all these writers? Harry Saul Markham, British author and speaker on identity, extremism, and liberal democracy. Perhaps even extreme liberal democracy. I don't know. You may clarify that later. He's brought with him his book called The Melted Pot, Diversity, Anti-Semitism, and the Limits of Tolerance. Now, Harry has written for various publications as well, grappling with a range of subjects, free speech, Islamism, and anti-Semitism, of course. And he frequently gives talks to a variety of audiences where he delights in disrupting the orthodoxies of our age. So you have something to look out for tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Now, then, finally, on the opposition side, we have the co-founder, indeed, the person who took the initiative to start the Agora, namely Stan Billington. Now, yes, give him a round of special applause for him for that. Now, he holds a BA in Economics and Management from the University of Oxford, and he's worked in banking. Again, we don't hold it against him. Now works in the field of prosthetic limbs. Now, he is a very hard-working political activist. If there is a placard, he'll come and hold it. And he's someone who's deeply engaged in several issues, ethical veganism, and lately also he's been very, very engaged in this very subject that we are debating tonight, and that's one of the reasons why he wanted to take on this debate. Now, he loves the Enlightenment and Enlightenment period, and those are, of course, the values that we build this debate club on. So, later on, when we will have our questions from the audience, I will ask you to be factual, to be to the point on the issue. We do not accept ad hominem attacks. We do not accept slurs and things like that. If you do that, then I will ask you to sit down and shut up, basically, and then we'll move on to the next person. So so free speech, but within the realm of respect and logic and rationality. That's our motto. Right. Those are our speakers. Let's give them a big round of applause. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you all know what this debate is about. The motion is this House believes anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. The way we're going to do it is that we are going to take up a vote to see how people feel about it before the debate. Then after. Right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, basically, we have a large majority in favour. We'll see how many changes their minds, which is what's important. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think it is now time to hear the first argument in favour for the proposition. Speaking for 10 minutes, please welcome to the podium Jake Wallis Simons.
Well, good evening, everybody. Nice to see so many people here. Thank you for inviting me, William. We had an inauspicious start this evening because somebody managed to knock over a glass of water all over our books and everything, which I thought was a hostile act, but it turns out it was Harry's mum. So, not sure what that means, but it means something. So I wasn't, to be honest, I was a bit reluctant to come and debate this evening because the motion seems to me to be a little bit obvious. That, I mean, most right-thinking people should agree with it. In my view, what it boils down to is whether Israel has a right to exist or not. I don't think we should be debating that in 2026 here in London. I think we should be debating whether the Islamic regime should have a right to exist, which has just massacred upwards of 30,000 people, unarmed civilians, campaigning for nothing more than their own democratic rights on the streets of Iran. But such are the times that we live in that we do need to put this to the question, put this to the floor. I would make just two observations about this motion. The first is that it almost certainly would not be debated here this evening if it wasn't for October the 7th, 2023. And that bears thinking about. October the 7th, 2023, when 1,200 Israelis were butchered, massacred, many of them raped, mutilated. There are credible reports of necrophilia. When 200 odd were seized and taken into Gaza, after which Hamas hid amongst civilians to try to lure the Israelis to kill civilians, innocent civilians, for the sake of propaganda. That's why we're here. That's why we're debating this. It seems to me as if Hamas has been quite successful in convincing the West that maybe it's not jihadism that's the problem here, maybe it's the Jews. It's ironic, isn't it, that by that massacre, they've caused people to think, maybe Israel was a bad idea after all. How extraordinary and how disgraceful. My second point that I want to reflect on about this topic is that in my mind, the prominence with which this question is normally treated in our culture is testament to how impressive the inroads have been of extremist ideology in our society. I talk really about two. Number one, radical Islamism. We know about that. We know about their views on Jews. A poll shortly after October the 7th revealed that a third of British Muslims saw Hamas in a positive light, and that by coincidence was the same number that wanted Britain to be placed under Sharia. So we can talk about that, but we all know about that. The other radical ideology that has made inroads into our society is radical progressivism. I go into a lot of detail on these things in my new book, should you want to purchase a copy afterwards. And radical progressives, the left, the further you go to the left, the more likely they are to hate and despise Israel. It wasn't always the case. It's been the case really since the Cold War. During the Cold War, The Kremlin, as some of you may know, and if you don't, my book Israelophobia goes into it in a lot of detail. The Kremlin saw Israel as a bastion of Western capitalism, as an American proxy, and therefore embarked on one of the biggest propaganda efforts in recorded history, an anti-Zionist, if you will, propaganda efforts. And they had a group of what they called Zionologists sitting in the Kremlin, taking old anti-Semitic tropes and reprogramming them, representing them for the Israel age. So here are some things they came up with. Israel is an apartheid state. Israel is a white supremacist state. Israel is an ethnic colonialist state. Israel is as bad as the Nazis, and so on. Sound familiar? That's okay. Now, all of those quotes, all of those claims, you don't need me to tell you, are obviously wrong. All you need to do is go to Israel and look at how many people are white there. You'll see they're not in the majority. Go there and see how many Arabs play on the Israeli football team, run banks, are Supreme Court justices, and so on. You'll know there's no apartheid. I mean, these are demonstrably false. People believe them really because of the Kremlin propaganda that infected it into the West on the left. And that's why it has such a grip on the Western mind today. But as we've been talking about propaganda, I think it's necessary to define our terms, or at least to define a term, which is the term of Zionism. One of the main focuses of propaganda has been to redefine Zionism, to discredit it before you even utter it. So just to be clear, so we all know where we stand, Zionism is not racism, as the UN voted in 1975, shamefully, under influence from the Kremlin. It was only repealed in 1991 when communism fell. Not a coincidence. Zionism is not racism. Zionism is not the same as colonialism. Zionism is not ethnic cleansing. Zionism is not white supremacy. What is Zionism? Zionism is simply the belief that the Jews, like every other people in the world, have the right of self-determination. That's it. That is it. You can have a left-wing Zionist. You can have a right-wing Zionist. You can have a chauvinist, bigoted Zionist. You can have a super-liberal Zionist. What's that? How many minutes is that? 5. You have a whole but you know, you can have Zionists who love and campaign for a two-state solution. You can have Zionists who view a two-state solution as beyond the pale. Zionism is simply believing that the Jews have a right to self-determination. So what the other side are going to have to do is to convince you that the position that only the Jews, amongst all the nations in the world, are to be deprived of their right to self-determination is not anti-Semitic. That's their job. That's their job. I wouldn't like to be in their shoes, would you? And if we look at it historically, the other thing that we're going to hear a lot from the other side about is the plight of the Palestinians, the suffering of the Palestinians, the injustice of the Palestinians. Now, I'm not going to stand before you this evening and deny that any injustice has ever been committed against the Palestinians. Of course not. Of course not. But I am going to question one thing. Why the focus on this injustice above all other injustices at the time? Think back to 1947, 1948, when Israel was born. That was a period of great global upheaval. We'd had the First World War, which had led to the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, which had ruled the Middle East for 400 years. And we'd had the Second World War. Nation states were cropping up all over the region and all over the world. And in pretty much every single case, when a nation state was born, there were massacres, there was forced displacement, there were refugees, there were population expulsions, and the rest of it. Think for yourself, think about it. So 1947, that same year, the partition of India and Pakistan. 14 million refugees. More than 1 million people killed in that war. By comparison, in Israel, the War of Independence, about 16,500 people were killed, combatants were killed. About 700,000 odd Palestinian refugees, followed by about 900,000 odd Jewish refugees from the Middle East. The scale is totally divergent. I'm not just talking about there, there's many other places to look at as well. Turkey and Greece. From the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, the birth of Turkey and Greece. That's very off-putting. How many minutes is that? 2 more minutes, goodness. Turkey and Greece, Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, all of them. Massacres, forced expulsions, population expulsions, refugees. Exactly the same as Israel. All of them post-colonial states. And so the people to my left, was somebody laughing?
Snickering.
You were sniggering. The sniggering people to my left need to try to convince you of one final thing, ladies and gentlemen, which is this. If anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, why does it use the same tropes? I saw a poster about anti-Zionism yesterday, and it said that it wants to get rid of Zionist control over Britain. Zionist control? Where have you heard that before, ladies and gentlemen? In Hitler's Third Reich is where you've heard that before. Anti-Zionists call Israel baby killers. Where have you heard that before, ladies and gentlemen? I've heard it in well, not personally, but go back to 1144 in Norwich, when little William was killed. It was blamed on the Jews. It's the blood libel. So why are they singling out the Jewish people for lacking the right of self-determination? And why are they using anti-Semitic tropes while so doing? Those are questions which they have to answer, not me. So please support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jake. And now to open for the opposition, please welcome Peter Harncross.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, anti-Semitism is hatred of Jews. All Jews, anywhere. Hatred is an emotion. It is something you feel. Zionism, on the other hand, is a project. That project is the replacement of the Arab population of Palestine with a Jewish population. Like all projects, it has a beginning and an end. Its beginning was in 1896 with, a pamphlet by Theodor Herzl, in which he argued for a Jewish state, where Jews could have an identity and feel they belonged. But it had to be in Palestine, where David slew Goliath. Solomon built the temple on Temple Mount to house the Ark of the Covenant. Support came from the British government with the Balfour Declaration, which facilitated the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. It being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine. But that is not what happened. Between 1936 and 1939, so many Jews were coming to Palestine that there was serious Arab unrest. And the British, who had been given the mandate to administer Palestine by the League of Nations, produced a white paper limiting the number of Jews who could go to Palestine over a 5-year period. Now, the Jews had armed militias at this time, the Haganah, formed in 1920, the Palmach, formed in 1931, but there were two offshoots. The more extremist, the Irgun and the Lehi. The Irgun placed a bomb underneath the headquarters of the British administration on the 22nd of July 1946 and blew it up, killing 92 people. The British decided to give up the mandate and the Jews to declare a Jewish state. The Arab countries around, of course, did not agree. But in the 6 months before that happened, before the British left, the Jews wanted a state with defensible borders. And so they took steps to convince the Arabs, as many as possible, to leave. An example of this is the attack on the village of Deir Yassin, about 3 miles from Jerusalem, West Jerusalem, by the Irgun and the Lehi. And this was throwing grenades into people's houses. About 100 villagers died. But the...
Have we got that under control now? Yeah, please do turn off sound. Beg your pardon.
But the effect was that people fled from villages for miles around to Jordan and East Jerusalem. At this time, about 750,000 Arabs fled their homes, mainly to Jordan. Israel became a state on the 14th of May 1948. It was attacked by Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon. But when an armistice took effect some months later, Israel had increased its territory. And then, during the Six-Day War of 1967, Israel occupied East Jerusalem. Now, there were moves to end this cycle of wars in 1993 to 95 with the Oslo Accords, which laid the groundwork for a Palestinian state in the occupied West Bank. But its champion, Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, was shot dead by a Jewish student, Yigal Amir, on the 4th of November 1995. The Oslo Accords established the Palestinian Authority as a limited governing authority for the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. But Hamas was elected to govern Gaza in 2006. And they kicked out the Palestinian Authority from Gaza with the Gaza War of June 2007. Israeli settlers have also established settlements and outposts in the West Bank. Over 450,000 Israeli settlers in 144 settlements and 196 outposts, plus 220,000 settlers in East Jerusalem as of January 2023, 2 years ago. That is 670,000 settlers. And these settlements are illegal under international law, but encouraged by the Israeli government. There have been, then we have the atrocity committed on the 7th of October, 2023. A crime against humanity. We know what happened since then, but it is what happens now that concerns me. In 2022, two parties that had until recently been deemed too dangerous to participate in elections became part of the coalition government of Israel. The religious Zionist party, headed by Bezalel Smotrich, who became finance minister with responsibility for expanding settlements in the West Bank, and the Jewish Power Party, headed by Itamar Ben-Gvir, who became national securities minister, responsible for the police and prisons. Smotrich has said, the Palestinians have three choices: live in designated areas under Israeli occupation, emigrate, or die as a martyr. He says, my life's mission is to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state. I am establishing facts on the ground in order to make Judea and Samaria, that is the West Bank, an integral part of the state of Israel. And a day after the army shot 2 Palestinians dead after they had surrendered with hands raised, and that was caught on camera, Ben-Gvir posted on X, the forces acted exactly as expected of them. Terrorists must die. He also posted, one of the highest goals I have set for myself is to worsen the conditions of terrorists in the prisons and to reduce their rights to the minimum required by law. Earlier, he released a video saying prisoners should be shot in the head instead of being given more food. Israeli settlers, backed up by the army, will continue to attack Arabs in the West Bank, destroying homes and property, pouring concrete down wells, in 130 years is what has happened. The trouble is, 80% of the population, which is Jewish, wants to get rid of the other 20%. The 80% of the population who are Jewish believe that they are there by divine right, and that the other 20% of the Arabs have no rights at all.
Thank you to Peter, and let me just correct my pronunciation of his name. It's Peter Humcross. Humcross, yes? Humcross. Now, to rebut, please welcome back Jake Wallis Simons to the stage.
I'm not sure he likes Israel very much. I'm not quite sure what the point of that was, really. I mean, it was a biased and incomplete history in a contested history, telling us all that there are some bad Jews. Well, of course there are bad Jews. I mean, you know, my book Israelophobia opens with a quote from Zev Jabotinsky, which I will share with you. It says, "We are a people as all other peoples. We do not have any intentions to be better than the rest. As one of the first conditions for equality, we demand the right to have our own villains, exactly as other people have them." I think I would just add to that the simple observation that the people who shout the loudest about Israel, people who hate Israel the most, people who are the most vocal anti-Zionists, ask them what they think of Britain. Ask them what they think of the West. That will disclose where anti-Zionism comes from. It isn't about the rights and wrongs of 1947 amongst the rights and wrongs of all other nations in the region all being born and you know, massacring each other and populations being thrust across borders and all that. It's not about that. They're picking out that narrative because they wish to destroy the Jewish state as the prelude to bringing down and subverting the West. That's quite simple. And just from that little, I don't know what it was, sort of biased version of Wikipedia, I'm not sure it really takes us any further, apart from perhaps to confirm that you must support the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And now for the second contribution from the opposition side, please welcome Harry Saul Markham.
Well, shalom, salam, good evening. It's a great pleasure to be on the same panel with my old pal, the fellow elder of Zion, JWS, in this great battle of the Titans. And I thought I'd begin tonight with a quote from not a Jew, but a hero of the Palestinian people, Mahmoud Darwish, the great poet, who in a 1997 interview made the following declaration. Do you know why us Palestinians are so widely known around the world? Because you, the Jews, are our adversaries. The interest in the Palestinian question is a function of the world's interest in the Jewish question. Yes, the world's main interest is you, not me. Had we been at war with Pakistan, no one would ever have heard of me. Ladies and gentlemen, we on this side of the house contend that anti-Zionism is not some kind progressive movement with noble and laudable intentions of bringing peace and justice to the Palestinian people or to any people. On the contrary, at its core, anti-Zionism is an anti-Jewish conspiracy built on demonic, obsessive and delusional lies, inversions and calumnies with one clear objective: to rid the world of its sole Jewish state. Now, if this debate were taking place in, say, 1946, I would be on the other side, because criticisms of Zionism, at least in the beginning, were a family affair. They were common. They were not anti-Semitic. But we are in the January of 2026. We are not debating the motion anti-Zionism was anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism as a theory is anti-Semitism. We are discussing anti-Zionism is, meaning today, anti-Semitism. And Zionism is no longer some abstract idea discussed in the extravagant buildings of Berlin, Brussels, or Basel. It is a reality. Its progeny in the form of Israel exists. In that sense, in the same way, we are not Jinnaists, or the movement which founded Pakistan after Muhammad Ali Jinnah, or Francoists or Angloists. We do not need to be Zionists. This is not a movement. It is now a country which is home to almost 8 million Jews and 2 million Arabs. As far as Zionism is concerned, it has achieved its principal aim, which is to establish a Jewish state in the historic homeland of the Jewish people, a land to which we have been connected and in which we have maintained a constant presence for over 3,000 years, before, I should say, the words Islam or Palestinian even existed. Now, to be clear, we on this side of the house are not saying that a thoughtful critique or criticism of Israel or Zionism are inherently anti-Semitic. We are certainly not saying criticisms of the Israeli government or Israeli society or the way in which Israel has prosecuted its war in Gaza is anti-Semitic. That would be absurd. Are we seriously going to call the Israelis on the streets of Tel Aviv anti-Semitic? Of course not. And by the way, we are not even saying that disliking Israel is inherently anti-Semitic. There are lots of countries we dislike. Don't get me started on the French. And we still believe they have a right to exist. But anti-Zionism is not about an honest and thoughtful criticism of a state or policy. It is an assault on a country not for what it does, but for the essence of what it is. Like Joseph K. and Kafka's The Trial, Israel is guilty of the very crime of its existence. Anti-Zionism is the belief that Israel, this country the size of Wales, is the only country in the world which cannot exist, and whose existence is uniquely malevolent and devilish. And whether the Prime Minister of Israel is Bibi Netanyahu or someone on the hard left, or even when it was Rabin, the anti-Zionist will not shrink from his or her entrenched position. Because Israel, for its very place in the family of nations and for its purpose, which is to normalize the Jewish people in a world that has made them its greatest other, is criminal. Now, there are, of course, a couple of exceptions. If you are someone who believes that no nation state in the world can exist, though I may think you'll start raving mad, and you don't pick on Israel specifically, then of course that isn't anti-Semitic. Similarly, if you are part of a very small sect of ultra-Orthodox Jews, and I should stress they are a very small and unrepresentative sect of unorthodox Jews, but believe that, but are not targeting Israel, specifically saying that Zionism is, they don't say that Zionism is illegitimate, they still believe in the concept of Jewish nationhood, then that isn't anti-Semitic. But the anti-Zionist, but these are the exceptions. The bulk of anti-Zionism today is by its very nature anti-Jewish because of the way it singles out Israel as if it were the Jew among nations. As with the anti-Semitism of the good old days, the anti-Zionist does not think only that Israel is evil or uniquely evil. He or she, and increasingly they, think that Israel is the source of all that is evil. In that sense, the anti-Zionism of today targets a Zionism which does not exist in reality. For that reason, we have dropped the hyphen when it comes to the spelling of anti-Semitism. It is simply a new manifestation or phase of what I describe in my pretty good book, should you wish to buy a copy, which I describe as a psychosis of anti-Semitism, which targets Jews not for what we are, but for what we are not, a demonic force intent on global domination. Of course, after the Shoah, attacking Jews for their religion or perceived race was no longer acceptable. The psychosis needed a new means of expressing itself. And so we turn to the words of a 1967 French philosopher, Vladimir Yankelevich, who said that the anti-Zionism of the anti-Semitism of the future in the guise of anti-Zionism will grant us a permission. Indeed, it will give us the right, nay, the duty to be anti-Semite in the name of democracy. Simply put, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism justified, democratized, made accessible, free for all. Anti-Zionism is a license to become democratically anti-Semitic. This is, if you will, polite anti-Semitism, cloaked in the guise of moral exhibitionism and progress. And anti-Semites never think of themselves as bad people. Throughout history, anti-Semitism has been seen as a form of social justice, ridding the world of the people responsible for our shared anguish. This is, by the way, what makes it murderous. The anti-Semite must imagine a world in which Jews do not exist. And of course, 1967 was an important year because that was the year from which the Soviet Union began their, as Jake alluded to, their campaign of propaganda, which, it should be said, was plagiarized directly from Nazi and Tsarist conspiratorialism. The Soviet Union claimed it could not be anti-Semitic because it did not see religion, or so it claimed, or other cultural boundaries. Yet this was not true. For Russian and Polish Jews in a number of 20th century inquisitions, often murderous and violent, anti-Zionism was the critical pretext. And it took this democratic Jew hate to audiences around the world, especially here in the West. And as a result of its campaign, this anti-Zionism has become a foundational factor in the formation of the prevailing thinking within contemporary left-wing circles. And this particular incarnation of this psychosis resurrects ideas of the past and makes them in vogue once again. And one useful quote, in fact, from 1925, illustrates this conspiratorial demonic anti-Zionism. And it reads, "For while the Zionists try to make the rest of the world believe that the national consciousness of the Jew finds its satisfaction in the creation of a Palestinian state, it doesn't even enter their heads to build up a Jewish state in Palestine for the purpose of living there. All they want is a central organization for their international world swindle." This comes from Hitler, who, along with another artsy ideologues, articulated views about Zionism which have become portentous in this kind of thinking. Now, I know time is short, and I must be extra terse here, and I will just make my final comments by talking about, by alluding to Camus. And Camus, in his wonderful book, The Plague, entered this plague with a very arresting couple of sentences. And he said that the plague bacillus never dies or disappears for good, that it can lie dormant for years and in furniture and linen chests, and in short, it will rise up again when the time is right. And that this plague of our time has risen. The rats are out of their cage. It may look different. It may even seem nice, but it remains a killer. And we do not need to only call it out for what it is, and that is why I urge you to vote with us tonight, but we must fight it with renewed urgency and tenacity. For it is us today, but it will be you tomorrow. And in the meantime, we will treat anti-Zionism with the contempt and ridicule it so richly and so thoroughly deserves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. And now, for a 2-minute rebuttal, please welcome back Peter.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I want to come back to present-day Israel, to the Israeli parliament and the present-day Israeli government. And I'm going to quote you from a Jewish newspaper, Haaretz, which is quite well known. The journalist is Joshua Leifer. In the Knesset on Wednesday was Nissim Vaturi, the body's deputy speaker and a member of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's governing Likud party. Vaturi crossed one of Israel's few political Rubicons and directly referenced Meir Kahane, a name who has become a rallying cry for settlers and ultranationalist groups across Israel. Asked if he was in favor of Jewish terror, Vaturi replied, "I support it. Believe me, Kahane was right in many ways where we were wrong, where the people of Israel were wrong." And he goes on in his article, since the 7th of October, Kahanism has become mainstream. It is the political style that relishes the dehumanization of Palestinians. It is the ethos according to which Jewish lives are seen as more valuable than all others. It is the ideology behind the normalization of population transfer and ethnic cleansing. Netanyahu's Likud has undergone a process of near total Kahanization, to say nothing of the settler right. 30 years ago, Kahane was the name of a man who most thought would be forgotten. Today, Kahanism is the governing coalition's operational ideology. Not my words, from Israel itself.
Thank you, Peter. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for the final opening speech tonight, please welcome for the opposition, Stan Billington.
Okay, thank you all for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to be speaking and a pleasure to be debating against you guys. Quickly, my journey to this issue. I used to be pro-Israel. I had a friend at university who I rode with who was Jewish, who now serves in the IDF, who made me initially sympathetic to Israel. And I watched a lot of Ben Shapiro, and I still do. And he told me that Israel is fighting terrorists, and I'm all for force in the face of, or in the course of a just war. So across those two things, I was sympathetic. But then I gradually moved away, learning about the issue, and then for me, it was reading about what happened to the Native Americans, the systematic and repetitive ethnic cleansing and slaughter, and the style of language that was used to justify it that turned me against it. Now, I said I was happy to be here. This motion is obviously a silly one, because technically it's a silly one, because Judaism is a 3,000-year-old people, tradition, culture, practice, etc. Zionism is a 150-year-old movement of people, or movement of peoples. They're obviously technically different. But if I were to take this issue seriously, which I will, because you guys have traveled here, I would say that this motion would hold if one of three things were the case. One, if that Zionism were fundamental to Jews as people. Two, that anti-Zionism were an unfair reaction to Israel. Or three, that anti-Zionism constituted an obsession with Israel, as both of them have suggested it is. Let's address them all at once and dismiss them. First, that Zionism is fundamental to Jews as people. Zionism, some Jews, not all, and I will not concede that this is the case, some Jews contend that Zionism is part of Jewish scripture and scripturally important. Even if that were the case, it doesn't matter. I'm opposed to Christian homophobia that is in the text. Doesn't mean I have some bigoted opposition to Christians as people. You understand? Do Jews even want Zionism? From the start, Zionism's main contractor, or the Balfour Declaration's main contractor was Edwin Montagu, the only British member of the cabinet who is Jewish, and he positioned that support for Zionism reflected a position that Jews weren't integrated in Europe, that they weren't fitting in the land, and he thought that it was a driving out of the Jews. He thought it was anti-Semitic to support Zionism. Arthur Balfour spoke out against supporting Jews fleeing Russian pogroms and actual anti-Semitism. In 1905, supported the Aliens Act and spoke out in Parliament about Jews not integrating Europe. So Judaism's main instigator, the street after which he's named, in which the Prime Minister lives in Israel, he was an anti-Semite, and a Jew was against Israel from the start for good reason. So, anti-Zionism is not fundamental to Jewish people. Is anti-Zionism an unfair reaction to Israel, to the Jewish state, as they call it? Well, Zionism involved people pouring into a land. Yes, they call it. Yeah, technically that's true. Zionism involves people pouring into a land in a colonial fashion, moving in hundreds of thousands to then demand 55% and take 78% of the land in a colonial replacement strategy. It has entailed illegality, violence, apartheid, ethnic cleansing, occupation, and genocide. I will support all of these. These are things to oppose. It has entailed, are we denying religious rights? Do Jews get a state? Does everyone get a state, especially if their religion allows it? It's little known that Christian Europeans going to America saw America as a virgin land that would allow a fulfillment of their Christian belief, a Christian utopia. It was religiously important to them. I oppose that as well. That is not justification for ethnically cleansing and slaughtering the locals there, as did happen. So, it's not an unfair reaction to Israel. Is anti-Zionism an obsession with Israel? As a quick aside, as they both contended, as a quick aside, I was at the Battle of Ideas Festival a little while ago. Jake was one of the speakers, and in that, some genius stood up and said that we anti-Zionists just flit from issue to issue, whether it's supporting trans people, opposing oil, supporting whichsoever. Apparently, we flit from issue to issue, and he got a big old laugh from all the Zionists in the room. Yeah, have your fun. But when he said that we focus on Israel as the source that all is evil, Harry just did, you guys also burst into laughter. So that's fine, laughter is good, but you cannot have it both ways. We cannot be simultaneously flitting from issue to issue, and also, or as part of the, what was it, Jake? Radical progressivism, we cannot simultaneously be doing that and exclusively obsessed with Israel. Doesn't make sense. Zionist expansionism is yet another squalid example of racist colonial expansionism, like what happened in Native America, parts of Africa. We oppose it all. Okay? Does that make sense? We oppose it. We march out in the streets against it in a way that we would not do for the SAF-RSF conflict in Sudan, in a way that we would not do against the theocracy in Iran, which I also oppose. We march against it in our streets because Israel is wholly dependent on Western economic, diplomatic, and military support for its slaughter and bombing of the region. We can influence that. Israel, if it were not had that support and were opposed properly under international law, political calculus would change, and my issue with Israel would be gone if it were in line with international law. Christians are mainly at fault for this, usually disgusting evangelical Christians who aren't exactly philo-Semitic in their support are funding this massacre and this ethnic cleansing. They're the people I have main issue with. Although some Jews, of course, in Israel, as we can discuss, some of them are war criminals and fascists as well. So it's the immorality of Zionism and all that's entailed that I oppose heavily, but perhaps even more is the stupidity, the rank stupidity of justifying it, as was the stupidity of justifying settler colonialism in Native America, the topic which I know most well as a parallel. Assuming retaliation, the first move. You move into someone's land, looking like you're about to take it, you threaten them thus, define them as a threat for opposing this, and then attack them and then slaughter their family. You're assuming their retaliation to be the first move and then justifying your actions ex post facto. It's brilliant. It's like if you punch someone in the face and then said, ooh, that guy looks like he's about to punch me in the face. I better kill him and his family. Brilliant. The fact that people there in a group, some people like you who read a similar book to you, live in a land, means that you get to go into a land, claim 55% and take 78% of the land. Genius. The idea that people thousands of years ago read a similar book to you in a land means that you get to pour in there and take over the land. Genius. The idea that where you're fleeing persecution, as the Ukrainians are doing, that gives you the right to take over a land. Well, if the Ukrainians demanded 55% of the UK, do you think that people would wear this pin as much as I do, the Ukrainian pin? Or would they fight it like the Arabs resisted that as well, like all people would? It's called empathy for the people who voted for the side. This is what people all do. If 800 of your civilians get killed, you get to flatten a city. Is that what we're calling for in response to the genocide in Gaza, that Israel be flattened? No, this is madness. We are calling for sanctions against Israel, economic sanctions, and yes, UN peacekeeping force that would go and get in the way of this genocide, that would bring stability and international law to the conflict, would stop the genocide, would change the political calculus in Israel, and entail an end to the apartheid, which relies on blind US, its colonial headquarters, the US's blind support. This would solve the issue peacefully. What they're doing, the continuation of this bombing and slaughter and apartheid, is madness. Why continue it, guys? It's been so long. Surely you've got it out of your system. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. And now for a 2-minute rebuttal, let's welcome back Harry.
Oy vey. Well, I just
What up?
thank you, Mr. Billington, for that. What you just treated us to is very interesting. I just wonder if anyone on the opposition tonight might like to answer the question or respond to the motion, because we've established that anti-Zionism is opposition to the existence, not a policy, not the actions of the state, but the very existence of a state. And I would just, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to ask questions, I'm not familiar with these very sophisticated debates, but do you guys oppose the very existence of Israel?
I'll get to it after.
Well, it's a simple yes or no. Do you guys...
I don't know what that means.
Israel is a country. Do you think it should cease to exist as a country? It's perfectly reasonable.
I think that the ethno-religious supremacy should end.
Yeah, okay.
The international
Yeah.
law should happen.
The question is, do you think the country has the right to exist?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, well, I think if anyone in this room, just to clarify the motion, in this room, who thinks it's okay to criticise the British government for what they do? Raise your hand. I encourage you to raise your hand. Who in this room thinks to say that it's acceptable to say Britain has no right to exist and its people should go into the sea? Who thinks that's acceptable? Well, there you are. You have your answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please. And on just one point of order to the opposition speaker. He referred to the genocide. It's important to point out that this has not been decided in a court of law that is competent in that issue. So he's entitled to his opinion. He's entitled to his opinion, but it's obviously not an established fact. So that's just a point of order. 1 minute rebuttal to Stan now before we break.
The Rwandan genocide hasn't yet been established by the ICJ as a genocide, so that's, I think, worth noting. So quick, we had a fun poll before. Who here thinks that Arabs, qua Arabs, matter just as much as Jews, qua Jews? Raise your hand. Okay, good. I'm not opposed to Israel. I do not support ethnic cleansing and genocide. That is what the Zionist side supports. I support international.
No, they didn't say that.
That's what Israel has just done, people. I've had to watch it before my eyes. You guys have not been detracting from the genocide in Gaza. I'm totally pro opposing this British government. If the British government decided for sectarian ethno-religious supremacy of Christians, where non-Christians were viewed with suspect and kept to an 80-20 rule, and qua outsiders were treated that way, especially if there were loads of them and they needed ethnically cleansing, that would be a bad thing. In the past, before 1967, absolutely, a Jewish state, that would probably have been my solution. I don't like the idea of an ethno-religiously defined state. It's not my bag, whether it's Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, or whatever. It's called the Enlightenment, guys. It's Enlightenment values, non-tribalism. But now that Israel has poured settlers into the West Bank and taken it over, there's now about, what, 7, 8 million of each group, all integrated together? Maybe there's diplomacy, maybe there's international law, maybe there's democracy. That's what I'm for. If you're against democracy and equal rights based on race, then you should be with me. If not, you should suspect yourself.
Thank you, Sam. Well, we all expected